Alright, let's go over Venthyr Frost versus Kyrian Arcane for Sanctum of Domination. Probably the most common question I've been getting asked on stream and in other places is just why I started as Venthyr, and thought I'd go over it in a video form because I have a lot of thoughts about it. So I guess the best way to do this, I guess, is like paint or something. Let's just do that, I guess. Alright. So let's just draw a little grid, I guess. Oh wow, that is a very nice line. Alright. This might make sense, it might not. Alright, Terra grew. What is after that? It's 9. Soul Render. Ner'zhul. And Paintsmith. Guardian. Wow, this looks very nice. Fate Scribe. And Kel'Thuzad. And Sylvanas. Alright. So, let's go over what the best spec is for each boss, I guess. I guess we can just fill them in. Alright, so Terragru doesn't matter. Frost, 9 Frost. Soul Render, Frost, Ner'zhul, Frost. Paintsmith, let's do Arcane. Guardian, Frost. Fate Scribe could be either Kel'Thuzad, Frost, and Sylvanas, Arcane. Soul Render and Ner'zhul are also probably pretty close between either. And let's see. Let's just scribble out the irrelevant bosses too. I guess Terragru, and 9. Pretty much everything up till Paintsmith is pretty relevant, but we'll keep these two in just to make it look nicer, I guess. And maybe we make a little drawing here. There we go. Now everything's filled in. Alright, so why did I start Venthyr? So let's just start with where we thought the hard bosses would start. Obviously, like Sylvanas, you're always going to want to be super prepared for that boss, but we thought the first hard boss was going to be Guardian. We thought the hard bosses of this raid were going to be Guardian, Fate Scribe, Kel'Thuzad, Sylvanas. We were not expecting Paintsmith to be as big of a hurdle as it was during the raid at the time. It was quite a surprise, and we were expecting this boss to be like 5 or 6 shot, like just killed really quick, because we kind of just blasted through it on testing, but that obviously was not the case. And okay, so I'm gonna talk about why each spec is good at what it's good at, I guess. I'll go over Soul Render and Ner'zhul briefly, because they are like, they're not hard bosses, but they, like, if you're not as good of a guild, they might take you a few pulls. Okay, so Soul Render, Frost is really good constant funnel, especially if you already have enough like add damage. You can just do a lot of priority damage. But it's like the same thing with Arcane. They kind of do similar things, but I think Frost is slightly better for this fight. And for Ner'zhul, Frost is also just better. A lot of multi-target cleave that Frost takes advantage of more than Arcane does. Both like 10-ish pull bosses, maybe more if your guild is struggling a bit more. Not very important. The first actual hard boss of this raid, of two hard bosses, is Paintsmith. And I was expecting this boss to be a lot more favorable for Arcane than it actually was. The reason is, okay, so why is it beneficial for Arcane? Let's go over that first. So the idea is you use cooldowns on the boss, and then an intermission happens, and while that intermission happens, your cooldowns are recovering, and that's really beneficial towards classes that have really strong cooldowns, because everyone's doing nothing, everyone's getting recharge time, so the classes that are going to benefit from the most on a boss like that are just classes with impactful CDs. So Frost is not that. Like, usually you just try to have your cooldown up forever, and if you're sitting on your cooldown being up, it's not good. But the reason Arcane wasn't as good as I thought it was going to be for this fight is because, like, a lot of the time you were just sitting AFK waiting for CDs to come up because there is no penalty via, like, Enrage. So, for example, P1, you'd pop your AP, and then right as your second AP is coming up, you'd have to AFK for just waiting for 3 minutes to come up for the next phase. And same with P2. You have more than enough damage on each phase, so repopping your cooldowns doesn't really help anyone. So having like minute 30, 2-minute cooldowns on that fight actually isn't even that good because you're not getting any value from them recharging on the intermission. Whereas if the damage check was a little bit tighter on this fight, Arcane would be really, really good because you'd be popping your second set of cooldowns, and then the boss would probably phase like 10-15 seconds right afterwards, and it would be a really, really insane Arcane fight. But that just wasn't the case. Still really good Arcane fight. The spike ball damage Arcane's really good at just because of resonance, for Kyrian specifically. Frost is still pretty good at that kind of stuff, but not as good as Arcane. And the most important part of this fight is last phase, just the burn. And Frost, Arcane are pretty similar. Arcane's probably a little bit more. You get 2 uses of your CDs, and you have a big ad funnel at the start of the burn, which is pretty good. It's not like the best thing ever because you can't get an actual proper big ramp because the boss takes a while to get down, but it's still pretty decent. But honestly, I was expecting Arcane to be more impactful on this boss. Still, I'd say slightly stronger than Frost, and probably one of the 2 real fights of this raid. So that is still an Arcane fight, just not. We expected it, or I expected it to be more favorable for Arcane than it actually was. All right, Guardian. We expected this fight to be like Sludge Fist last raid. But it just wasn't. The tuning wasn't there. I don't know if they didn't realize how strong the Domination Shard set bonuses were, or if they just tuned it wrong, but like you 6-healed this and killed it in 10 pulls. It was a big joke. The reason, I'll go over damage first. The reason damage-wise Frost is better is because it's a 6-minute fight in Rage no matter what you do. The boss in Rage is at 6 minutes, and what are your options here? So with Arcane, they can either go minute 30 or 2 minutes. Both of those don't end up well for a 6-minute Rage fight. So your cooldown's coming up right as the boss dies, not good. Frost, on the other hand, really, really good single target. And their cooldown, they're a class where it doesn't really matter if their cooldowns, or well, fight time, I should say, because their cooldowns are basically almost always up. And that's why Frost is better on a fight like this, single target. Alright, and defensives. So double block was actually really relevant in our planning before the raid for this boss. How we planned to do this was you'd utilize the double block from Frost to soak the tank mechanic multiple times, but that's not how it ended up needed to be done, since you could just use like 3 immunities to soak 1 set, so you didn't need as many immunities for the whole fight. Whereas we were planning to use multiple immunities in case they somehow prevented that, but you could easily just slam immunities for both tank combos. So you didn't actually need double block for this fight, but it was still just better for Frost damage-wise anyway. But ended up being a really easy fight, unfortunately, and probably won't be too impactful if you play Frost or Arcane. Especially with more gear later on, the damage won't be a problem of either spec on that fight. Alright, Fate Scribe. So, this fight, I'd say, is actually better for Frost, in my opinion, but also really, really good Arcane fight. In the boss damage phases, I'd say Arcane is better, but the intermission, Frost carries hard, just 2 targets stacked. one of the only classes that can actually use their cooldowns and have them up for boss, which is very, very powerful. Our strategy for this boss was to have Frost Mages basically always pop CDs and have just other people handle the actual mechanic, and that seemed to work out well. Arcane Mages, Arcane and Frost are both very, very similar boss damage outside of the intermission. So I'd still give an edge to Frost because of this. Also, double immunity, very strong in this fight. Being able to immune off the, I forget what it's called, but the circle. You can just entirely negate it, which is very helpful for scarier combos on this fight if you end up getting picked by that mechanic. And yeah, ended up being a very easy fight as well. Not really much to go off of. But yeah, it seems like they missed the tuning on this fight as well, compared to what we thought it was going to be, unfortunately. Alright, Kel'Thuzad. This is one of the weirdest fights in the raid. I was kind of unsure how this fight was going to go. It's just like, there's so much gimmicky stuff in that fight. For those of you guys that don't know, basically at 5%, the boss just stops doing any mechanics for a while. There's a similar thing to that on Fate Scribe. Like a few percent away from pushing in an intermission. If he was just there forever, he wouldn't do anything. And you were able to take advantage of that heavily on Kel'Thuzad to make it a really, really easy boss. But damage profile wise, Frost is like obviously a lot better for this fight. Just consistent damage for everything. It is a bit annoying if you have to stop DPS while you have Icy Veins up, but it didn't end up being a problem where it made Frost bad. Like, you could always plan around your Icy Veins timing and stopping DPS. Just good, consistent damage for tank ads, for slowing and killing the little revive boys, and good intermission damage. Just overall good spec. Double block wasn't really relevant on this fight. You can like immune the big meteor soak, but you didn't even need to immune it. You could just soak it with 2 tanks and like mirror images and barrier, and you're good. Alright, Sylvanas. This fight, I was expecting it to be an arcane fight. But on our kill of this boss, I was Frost. So why is that? Alright, day 1. We just killed Kel'Thuzad. We're going in Frost. You don't want to instantly swap Arcane, because what if Frost is good? What if we miss something, or what if something's different on Mythic where Frost is actually just good on this fight? So you always want to not swap because of how Covenants work in this game. Once you swap, it's 2 weeks to go back. So you try to do as much progress as Frost as possible before swapping, and that's what we did. So day 1, we just saw P3, and Frost seemed good, honestly. P1, the ad control was really good, actually being able to be one of the few classes that could kill it. Chains being stacked was good for Arcane and Frost, but like P1 looked a lot better for Frost than I thought it would. Obviously P1 ended up not mattering as much, but the ad control was extremely helpful with the slows and just being able to actually kill the sentinels. And P2, we saw P2 day 1, and we got a lot more consistently through P2 on day 2 and 3. We never actually saw the end of the fight cleanly until I think the day before we killed it. So the reason you don't swap Arcane yet, in my opinion, is you haven't seen the whole fight, and we didn't see the whole, like the entire like platform 3 or platform 4 fight until day 3. Sorry if this is like a bit confusing. I haven't really prepped anything on this. I'm just speaking. But yeah, you don't wanna swap until you've seen the whole fight, like all the way through. But yeah, boss damage. The most important thing on this boss, in hindsight, is boss damage. Is Frost better than Arcane in boss damage? No. Arcane is better. Why? Mainly because of P2. So for those of you guys that don't know, P2 on Mythic is completely different than it is on Heroic. Basically, you have 2 separate groups, and instead of starting with a boss burn, you start with an ad burn, and you're able to not commit AP to that as Arcane, and then save it for both boss burns. So you're gonna have double AP going into boss burns, whereas Frost, you can save it for boss burns, but it's just not as efficient as other classes using CDs there. So you use it on the actual ad platforms, which is fine. It carries those. It does a pretty decent damage, and it carries in like 15-ish seconds into the boss burn, so it's pretty efficient compared to other classes CDing the platforms. But it's just less boss damage. Like it's just less boss damage in that phase specifically, because Arcane's able to pop on the boss twice. And in P3, so keep in mind, Arcane just use their CDs, so they have like a minute 20 left on Arcane power going in the last phase. Frost usually has them up right away, but you save them until the Veil of Darkness, which is like 10 seconds into the last phase. So if Veil of Darkness mechanic didn't exist, I think the boss damage would be pretty equal. But since the boss constantly goes away, you lose a lot of uptime on Icy Veins for Frost just because you can't hit anything. Once you can't hit anything, you can't keep your Icy Veins up. It's really bad. But in the sort of thing I talked about with Painsmith earlier, when you can't hit the boss, it's actually good for more cooldown impactful specs like Arcane. So it's a bit better there. And if like the boss wasn't untargetable during Veil, I'm pretty sure they would be pretty similar. But with that and the extra P2 damage from Arcane, Arcane's gonna do, I'd assume, like if you have equal gear for both specs, probably 200k-ish more boss damage over the whole fight. Or not over the whole fight, from P2 to P3 compared to what Frost would do. Which could matter for sure. So why didn't we swap to Arcane? Basically, by the time we ended up getting the fight clean, like we saw up to the end of the fight, it was Monday. And for those guys that didn't, or for those guys that weren't watching the race entirely, on Monday, Echo was getting really consistent pulls. We felt like we were on a timer. I personally felt like there could have been relearning issues in P1, specifically with Sentinels. Probably wouldn't take too long, maybe like three pulls max, but still it could have been a lot of relearning for like other classes cooldown timings. I'm not sure. But the main thing is like we had the boss damage to kill it with Frost Mage. If we would have had a perfect pull, we had like 2 pulls in mind that like we could have killed the boss if everything went perfect. But that's aside the point. Like you could kill the boss with Frost, and Echo was putting on us on a really tight timer by being very close to killing the boss. So any extra relearning along with renown, that's like another point. I was only 40 renown, and you were required to get 43 renown at least, and 46 renown optimally to have like an optimal setup for that boss's Arcane, just renown wise. So that would have taken like 40-ish minutes probably, and that's extra time when we already know we can kill the boss with Frost. If we had like an extra day, I'm pretty confident I would have swapped Arcane, but the extra day after that was them killing the boss. And once they kill the boss, it's Mythic Reset, and you get like, I'm not getting 10% at least extra raid DPS from that reset, so it doesn't matter what spec you play, you could take off your staff and you still kill the boss with how much extra damage you got from the rekill, or reclear, sorry. So yeah, overall, I'd say Arcane, better for Sylvanas, Painsmith. Not entirely even like greater on Painsmith, but for sure Sylvanas. And for the rest of the raid, I'd say Frost is pretty dominant. So if you're looking for advice for what to start the raid as, I'd recommend starting as Frost and then swapping to Arcane, or even just staying Frost. Like, I don't know if you guys understand how easy Sylvanas gets with extra gear. Like we one shot on the reclear, and everyone's cooldown timings were so scuffed, it was unbelievable. Like you could kill the bosses Frost if you want. But optimally, Arcane would be the play for Sylvanas. And yeah, I definitely would recommend starting as Frost unless you want to play Arcane. Both specs work. And yeah, what else did I want to go over? Right, in hindsight, would I have swapped to Arcane earlier? I definitely think starting Frost 100% the move. I don't think I could be convinced otherwise that Arcane start was the play. I think people get convinced by Sims way too easily, and they need to actually just look at the fights and see what spec is good at what. But would I have swapped earlier on Sylvanas in hindsight? Like, obviously, if you knew the only thing that mattered was boss damage, yeah, but with what we had presented us and the clock that Echo put in front of us, I don't think it was possible for me to swap Arcane the last day without feeling like it could actually put us pretty far behind time wise. And I don't think you ever swap Arcane day one, even if you suspect it to be really good, just because of how Covenants work. Covenants didn't work the way they did. You could obviously just play whatever, and then it wouldn't matter. You just swap in between. That would be great. Hopefully that's a thing eventually. But for now, you can't do that, and can only work with what you have at the time. So I don't think I would have changed anything with Covenant decisions. And yeah, I think that's mostly everything I wanted to talk about. Thanks for watching. I stream on Twitch almost every day at twitch.tv/Imfiredup. Thanks for watching. I plan to do a few more YouTube videos talking about Mage stuff, Race World First stuff. I'm not sure if there's anything you guys want to see from me. Maybe you could put it in the comment section below. Yeah. Goodbye.